Welcome to ICG Magazine's Outside the Frame. I'm David Geffner, your host, as we visit with the world's best camera and publicity teams and their creative partners. Joining me today is Local 600 Director of Photography, Johanna Coelho, a 5-year union member who shot all 15 episodes of the new Max medical drama, The Pitt. Born and raised in France, JoJo, as her crew calls her, came to the U.S. to further her cinematography studies at the American Film Institute. She shot many documentaries, reality TV, episodics, including 2 seasons of ABC's long-running hit series, The Rookie. Johanna also has had 2 recent indie features premiere, Seance at the Newport Beach Film Festival and All Happy Families at the Chicago Film Festival. Johanna, JoJo. Before we dive into The Pit, I want to hear how a young woman, born and raised in France, raised on probably European cinema, I'm guessing, educated at the Sorbonne, ends up shooting 2 TV, cop, and medical dramas. What made you want to come to LA to study cinematography?
So it's true, actually. The European approach is pretty different from the American one. And I think what I always loved about the European cinema is the way they approach stories. I think they're very natural, and realistic on what real life is. Mm-hmm. And what I love about the American cinema is how they push the visuals even further to support these stories. And so that's why it was important for me to come here. It's to kind of find a blend between the European cinema on the natural approach to the stories, mm-hmm. and support it and push it even further visually with the American approach.
Do you feel like the aesthetic that you learn in European cinema, has it carried through, into your work, your style? Has it shown through your work as a DP, what all that imprinted from your work in France?
It's a good question. I moved to the US pretty fast in my studies. So I feel like a lot of what I learned was in the US. Maybe what carry on is more personality and, the way I want to feel close to the stories and the characters. Maybe that's the European approach that is left in me. Mm-hmm. Just really, adapting constantly to the characters and trying to really feel what they feel and transmit that visually as much as I can. And then, really with the American learning that I did, it's emphasize that even more and elevate the visuals in that way.
Is there a big difference in the working style? We'll get into your crew on The Pit a little bit later, but is there a big difference in what the set feels like on a French project, let's say in France, versus something shot here?
So I haven't done that many French sets, but in the ones I've done, there is definitely a little of difference, in the way we work. So, for example, key grips in France, they're fully dedicated to camera support. Huh. So, for example, if you need gels or flags, this is the electricians that do it in France. It's actually not the key grip department.
Okay.
What else? I mean, the key grip also does the slate. Here it's the
right.
second is the sound, brings the slate. In France, it's the key grip who's responsible for the slate. You have wine at lunch, but that's something we can talk about. No, and I feel it's a little more, and I might be wrong again, I haven't worked on a lot of French sets, but I felt it was more, everyone is hands-on, where it's much more defined and precise on what job is for who here, right. I would say. That's mostly my differences, yeah.
We mentioned you went to AFI.
Yes.
Really, world-renowned school, obviously, and based in Los Angeles. What were your main takeaways from that experience? You studied cinematography.
Yes.
But you probably got to work at other crafts, I imagine, right, over the course of your time there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the great things about AFI is you really crew for each other. So you really pass through all the departments within cinematography, and you learn all of them. So you ACs for each other's, you even, gaff or key grip. So there's a lot of learning in every single craft that supports cinematography. And I think that's really what stands out with AFI is you pass through all these crafts. So when you're DPing, you really understand what you're asking your crew because you've lived all of it yourself during your studies and after that as well. I also think, what was standing out at AFI is the diversity of the class. We were from all over the world and, different generations. And I really, in addition to learning with the program, I really learned a lot from the students that were there with me. Wow. Because they all had a different ways to approach things, right? People work differently, and we kind of all share that knowledge from, what we were doing at home. Some, came from Germany, some different part of the States, etc. And then we kind of all not compare, but like all learn from each other's in that way. And then once you have all this knowledge of how everyone can do things differently, then you can choose what works for you. And I think that's what I loved a lot at AFI, is that learning from everyone the way they do things differently, and then I could find my own ways.
Unionism is a strong term in France. There are very strong unions throughout all the different French industries, as we know. When did you join our union, Local 600, and how did it come about?
Yeah, so I believe I joined somewhere around July 2019. And I was thinking about joining for a while. I actually shot a feature years before that flipped, and I had the opportunity back then to join the union. It was just a little early in my career, and I didn't have any connections really with the union back then. So back then it didn't make sense. But so I was at a point in my career where I felt like I wanted to be able to get on union shoots. And so, I did the process of completing all the days, to like with contract services anyway. And so I joined in July 2019, and I think I got on the rookie season 2 as a double up DP in August, I think, or right after. It was quite an incredible timing, honestly, and I would have not been able to get on if I hadn't joined the union just before.
Right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a great timing. You've described the cinematographer's role in interviews you've done as being a visual psychologist, which I love that term. I haven't heard before. Someone who interprets the character's emotions, I'm quoting you, to create the best visual atmosphere for actors to perform in. So my question to you is, how does that translate into the tools of the cinematographer's craft? Lens, lighting, camera movement, all of those kind of ephemeral things that maybe the actor doesn't fully understand. A lot of them do, but some don't. So how do you translate that emotional sense in front of the camera to what you're doing behind?
Well, I think for what the actors, how you would influence the actor's performance to believe the environment they are in, that would be probably more lighting, in the atmosphere you create for them, and camera in the way, if you're really close to them with the camera and the lens, then maybe they feel more this closeness with the audience, and then that can really bring out maybe more emotion at that moment for them. But for lighting, if you enter a room and it's all dim light and, it creates a bit of an intimate atmosphere and you feel more comfortable, or if you're suddenly in a darker space, and it's eerie and there's flickering lights, then it makes you unsettled. And I think these environments that you create, also help the performances for the actors to act in. So, when you approach a story and you have a script, I always feel like it's so important to understand what the character is going through. And what are they going to feel in what scene? And, that should influence so much, in my opinion, the lighting and the approach of the atmosphere you're creating, because I think that would first bring it out of them in the acting, but also it makes the audience feel what the person feels in that scene. And so, again, for camera, if you have a slow traveling, when you film that, I feel like the actor feels the camera moving slowly too, and that probably defines the pace also at which they go as well. Though I know the camera follows the actor, but it's also a dance a little bit,
Yeah.
Or again, if you just hand out and following someone, you can feel more an intensity, and it's again a dance with the actor where you have an energy that comes together that is transmitted to the screen. For the tools that the actors can't see, like filters or like filter or choice of lenses, I feel like that's really what elevates then an emotion, right? So if you use a lens that, you should have a very shallow depth of field, or, it's distorted on the side, it really focuses your eye on what, is sharp and in front, and the rest feels completely isolated. And that would give you a feeling and emotion that it's a bubble, or it's something that, it's in the head or with the character, and the environment is not noticed at that moment, for example. So the different tools you're using help the audience feel what the character feels in this moment.
Well, you're obviously doing something right to have shot a whole season by yourself, 15 episodes of The Pitt. We want to start talking about that now. We covered Rescue High Surf not long ago. I wrote the article. That's a John Wells show. We know John Wells' history. He loves that camera to be loose, to be free, to be, as you said, very close to the actors and intimate. the question for you is, how did the look start when you came in, and how did you contribute, I guess, and did it evolve at all?
Yeah. Well, in my first interviews process, I knew a few things already. I knew they wanted it to be fully handheld. That was set in. I knew there was going to be a hospital with white walls. That was also set in. You know what you sign on when you sign for this contract.
All white.
All right, here's the challenge. And so that this was, and they wanted the actors to move freely. They didn't want a gear on the ground. That was they wanted the ground to be free for the actors to keep moving. Oh, and they didn't want any marks either. So these things were set in. It was like we wanted to be like a live theater, and cameras follow and adjust with the characters. So what I contributed in, was definitely helping setting up the stage and designing the lighting that it would work for that as a 360 set with honestly no lights on the grounds, no stands, no flags, nothing. And then, I kind of created a framing, visual references for framing and kind of the rules we wanted to apply within that world of handheld and following characters, like what would be important to elevate our story. And so we kind of found a visual language. I kind of did a pitch where I was saying how close and how we should keep following the characters, even sometimes we're on their back and sometimes we lead them, and only seeing what they see when they see it. So the story is only discovered through their eyes most of the time, and we notice elements sometimes that are rack focused in the back and then comes back to the foreground. It was all kind of these little rules that I brought in. And the way, we wanted to shoot more, dirty overs, really, when they're talking to someone over, or a clean shot very close to the actor when it's really more in the head. It was kind of all these rules that I pitched in and we redefined precisely with John Wells before we started shooting. Yeah.
So given that, what kind of lenses and camera platform did you choose to support all that?
Yeah, so we're shooting two Alexa Mini LF, and we shot with Ingenio lenses, the Optimo Primes on our A camera. And then on our B, we had the Ingenio Ultra Compact Zoom, the 37 to 102, I believe. That is an exact match of the primes, actually.
That's why you split zooms and primes?
That's why we split it. I mean, there's a few reasons why I'm using a mix of prime and zoom on B. But so the first reason for the choice of these lenses, I did a lot of testing for that. And so one of the reasons was the weight, because we were all handheld.
Right.
So we had to take that in consideration. And I knew I wanted a zoom because ACAM was going to be defining the shots and BCAM was going to steal moment. And sometimes we're stealing multiple moments in one shot or one take, right? So we needed the possibility to resize. We never used the actual zoom in the shots, but it's just for a resize option. And that's why I wanted the zoom on BCAM. I didn't want to put a zoom on ACAM because, it would still add a little bit of weight for the ZG rig we're using. But also I wanted really to keep in that framing, the definition of the framing we made. I really wanted to keep specific sizes of lenses. So I was always afraid if we would go on the zoom, we would always go a little more, a little less. But now we really kept our sizes and we mostly used the 50 and the 75, on full frame. So then the zoom was here to match this size. And on the 37 to 102, then you can access the 50 and 75 very easily. We did, sometimes went longer than that. But that's the reason why I wanted a mix of primes and zooms, and I needed a perfect match. I really didn't want to have, we're already dealing with different, same cameras, but the sensors don't always read the same, right? So I didn't want the primes and zooms to then not match because it was important for me.
And your camera operators, thank you for that. And we're going to have your B camera operator, Aymae Sulick, come in a minute. But before we bring Aymae in, I want to talk about the set. Everyone who was interviewed for our article in our May cover story on the Pitt said they felt like they literally were walking into an ER. Like they had never been on a set so realistic, so big, filled with so much action, for lack of a better word, consultants, real nurses, everyone's in scrubs. Talk about the collaboration with your production designer and also the other HODs, your chief lighting technician and your key grip.
Yeah. No, it's so true. When you walk on the set of the Pitt, you really do feel like a real ER, ground. And the reason for that is because the set is fully built as if it was that. The fact we have nothing on the ground but the tools and the counters and everything you would have in the ER room. None of our walls are moving. We have a full ceiling with all our lighting integrated. Our counters do not move. The only things that move are things that would truly move in an ER room.
Wow.
So, gurneys or anything on wheels, but the rest doesn't move at all, which obviously also brings challenges sometimes to shooting. But also it forces us to stay in that cinema verite documentary feeling that you cannot be in places you wouldn't be in a real documentary, and that's kind of part of the rule as well. And so we really work with Keelan, my chief lighting technician, and Max, my key grip, to really create the lighting integrated in the set. Though, you don't have like wall lights too much. It's mostly ceiling lights, right? So we pick the right kind of troffers we wanted. We put on LED strips in there. So it's fully controllable by our dimmer board person. And then, our key grip created tools that helps us kind of still, have a little bit of control on if people stop under a can or under a troffer for a long conversation, it's a little harsh still sometimes. And, we still want it to be a little cinematic. So he created tools that are like frames, for example, that would just magnet to the ceiling on the troffers.
Wow.
And he created them with his team as a 3D printer that matches exactly the tile of the ceiling.
Wow, that's your key grip, Maxwell Thorpe, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So with his team, he created a lot of 3D tools like this, that 3D printed tools, that help go really fast. So he would really go and magnet on this diffusion frame on the ceiling. Sometimes it probably got caught on camera a few times, but you can't even tell because they're a perfect match to the ceiling. So you don't even really know when it's there. And he created some cups that also magnet to the cans because the cans are even harsher. So he created a 3D tool to actually release it and
like shoot it up, shoot it up at the can light?
It would rest on it and he would release it and it would magnet.
Oh my God.
It's all like tools that he created. So we don't have, again, flags or anything like that. The only lighting we do have beside integrated to the stage is outside the windows, right? So, outside we have very few main windows, but we do have real lighting equipment back there. But yeah, so we work really well together to create this sense of integrated lighting and 360 set. The white walls obviously help a lot to fill in, right? And what we did in addition to that, Keelan created onboard lights on the mat box that are customized and fully controllable as well. That one is on the left of the mat box and one is on the right side. So if you're filming close to a character, you can kind of choose where the lighting comes from. It's small, from the left, right, but you don't have to have specifically full on frame. Sometimes you would just put it on the left side, so it's a little more wraparound, right? Sometimes we've used both at the same time, so sometimes it switches during the shot too, And all of this is controllable. So if you pass through a glass window, it would dim them down so you don't see them in the glass and come back on, etc. So it's a live theater in many aspects of it, because it is for the actors, but it is for the crew as well. I mean, the lighting moves during the shot. Same thing, if you start moving in a direction, you would bring on the lights behind us on the ceiling, right? So and then as the camera turns, you would switch where the lights, would be brought up as well to help on the faces. And you also use a dot dash on the pole for some of the shots, when we have long moves that are just helping to fill in a bit more the faces of people walking, etc.
That's your chief lighting technician, Keelan Crothers, right?
That's
and then
correct.
You worked obviously with production designer Nina Ruscio.
Exactly. So with Nina, we did a lot of work on choices on the set. So obviously she was part also of, designing the lighting on placement and all of this, but also the wall colors. We think about white walls, but it's amazing to know how many shades of whites you can do.
How many did you have to go through?
I think we tested over 50.
50 shades of white?
Yeah, I believe so.
Wow.
And a lot of them, she kind of created it. She would add a little bit of tint here and there.
Yeah.
So, we're like, okay, we had a full range of skin tones on our show. And that was also a big concern, right? We wanted to make sure that no matter what, the white we choose looks good on every skin tone.
Wow.
So we tested some whites that were, a little tinted red and a little magenta or a little tinted green. or warm or cold, and different levels of it. And we found this white that just looked good on every single skin tone. Because sometimes you had a white that looked good on a darker skin tone, but then it looked a little pink on someone white, and
yeah.
So it was a lot of testing, but it was a lot of fun to find that white, and then we had to find the shine of the white, right? So there was different level of shine. We tested something that was called eggshell that was too matte, and then nothing was reflecting at all on the set, so it felt flat, right? We still wanted to feel dimension on the set. So then we ended up, trying something a little shinier, but it was too shiny. So then the cans did too much hotspot on the walls. So we found something in between. I mean, everything is a choice on the set. And Nina and I had a lot of fun collaborating together for that.
Yeah, and it's funny because probably the average viewer watching it may not have known all what went into that, but they feel it. It's what you went back to what you're talking about, this emotional feeling that the cinematography, the stage design, the lighting, everything contributes, right, to the story. You feel it in some way.
Yes.
Before we bring in Aymae, your B camera operator, you also did one more thing interesting on the show is there were flashbacks to COVID-19 during the show, right? It's set after COVID-19, present day. And tell me about that. So people are wearing masks, COVID-19, everybody's in a face mask in some ways, particularly in an ER. How'd you approach that?
Yeah, it's funny. These flashbacks were an interesting conversation with John Wells because there was one thing we didn't want to do is make it look too much like a classic flashback, changing the color and all of this. It was like, no, it needs to still feel the ER, but just back then, etc. And so we didn't want to change the color. It's still the same white. It's still the same thing. I did added some filters in camera. That's the only time I'm using filters. There's 0 filters in my cameras otherwise. We use the Hollywood Blackmagic filters, and we stack a 2 and a 1, so we have a level 3 basically. And sometimes, it's a straight POV in the shots. And so Maxwell Thorpe and his team created a 3D printed kind of railing that they put on the camera, and we attached a real, mask. I have a picture of it. Yeah, we attached a real mask on it, and just putting, you can feel the top of it, so you really feel you're looking.
So you have a camera on a slider probably, and a mask basically.
No, it's on handheld or the CG.
Handheld.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was handheld at this moment, but yes, no, it's literally just rails he puts on top, and that attached, and we could adjust the tilt and the level of the mask and all of this. Yeah, they just created a lot of things like that. But yeah, we wanted it to feel real, but the flashback is just felt by more extra layers of filtration, so it's hard to see like it was in COVID. We were all having these extra things above our eyes, and I think that's really what we wanted it to feel, like intense and behind this cage nonstop.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, we want to bring on Aymae. So up next, we'll be joined by B camera operator Aymae Sulick, who will give her take on this very special and challenging series. Joining us now is the Pitt's B camera operator Aymae Sulick, a 12-year member of the ICG whose credits include acclaimed episodics like Dollface, Insecure, and the L Word Generation Q. Aymae received her MFA from USC School of Cinematic Arts with a focus in cinematography. Along with her scripted work, she's worked in documentaries and reality TV, including 12 seasons with the Big Brother franchise. Aymae, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
As I noted, you have plenty of experience shooting non-actors, we'll say, from reality TV and documentaries, as you've also done live events. But it sounds, talking with Johanna, the Pitt was something completely different from all of your experiences. Can you tell me how you worked with your A-cam op, Erdem, and kind of how the whole puzzle fit?
Yeah. The Pitt is definitely very special and unique. And I like the puzzle analogy because really, if every single person, cast and crew, has to be working well together and communicating to end up achieving basically what we do on that show.
Mm-hmm.
Erdem and I are what I think is the most fun piece, which is getting to do this dance. That's very elaborate and is also with very multiple people, but actors, background, boom operator, focus puller, watching out for reflections. It's a very unique dance. So the way we work is basically after there's a private rehearsal, we get to see the rehearsal with the crew. And while we're watching, we're watching the blocking and the timing of things and keeping an eye out where we can be or what shots could potentially work. And then we discussed with JoJo, who has already been in the private rehearsals, so has an idea already of what she wants, but she is an amazing collaborator who really values us too as storytellers. So we can work together and then with our input, help design the more specifics of the shot. And then once we're actually in the flow of things, to execute it, Erdem and I are working with, the AD team for the background, or where equipment gets moved from the prop team and set deck. And so it's really communicating with a bunch of people to make it happen.
What you're describing, I remember being in the truck to watch American Ninja Warrior, which is a reality competition show. Multiple cameras and a director and a producer and a DP kind of all switching simultaneously. So my question, JoJo, is, did that work in any sense here? Like, what were you looking at? Was there a video village that you're looking at? Are you looking at the camera with the director? Are you on comms with both operators, telling them instructions, or how did it work during the shot?
Yeah, so what we ended up doing is, because we couldn't really be on the set just because it's such a dance everywhere that you might be seen, and we could see us in scrubs, but we can't see the monitors, right? So we ended up being at we had the minis that were 13-inch monitors in a room, hidden in a room. We would pick a room that was not gonna be in the frame, and I was with the director, AD, the writer was there in general, so it's supposed to be a small group watching here. And I was on walkie-talkie. We ended up doing the walkies because they handheld all the time, and the comms kind of became a little bit too much, going handheld every. So we were on walkie-talkie. Honestly, I was trying to give, I was trying to not give any notes during the text, because I think that throws you off, especially when you have so much instinctive, such an instinctive shot to do.
Yeah.
Because there's things that are changing during the take. Actors do things differently a little bit sometimes. So if you start talking to them, it's gonna throw away their instincts. So sometimes we did it. It depends on the director as well. If the director wanted me to communicate a note, then I would do it at that moment. But often we would just adjust for the next take. So we would cut, would run in, and we'd talk about things. Okay, let me focus more on this instead of that.
Yeah.
Maybe get this moment here. She's gonna turn. Make sure to catch her here. And so we would just give these quick notes and then do it again. And then I would say things are always a little different in each take, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And we would kind of go until we embrace the take that just worked, or we got all the moments we needed, Yeah.
Amy, your focus puller in our article, Kirsten Sellos, says that not only did everyone get the scripts in advance, meaning all camera department got it in advance, but they sort of expected you to know the story. Like, you can't just get the sides and walk on set and we're shooting this shot today or this scene today. You needed to know what was happening with these characters. How did that kind of inform your process? And then I want you to talk about working with Kirsten and the focus pulling aspect.
Yeah, I think it was very helpful to understand where characters are coming from, where they're going to go to, what emotional state they're in. So you kind of know what's happening on the surface, but then also what's going on underneath or in the background, because it is so open that there could be people in the background that they just came from talking to, or that they're thinking about, or they see something, someone go by.
This is on-camera action in the background, or that you'd be picking up as a V-cam shot?
Yeah, potentially. And even like the trauma room scenes when there's so many people in there, and knowing there's the relationship between these people and what's going on in that moment besides what they're actually doing with the patient. So it really helps to be tuned into that, and what's in the script can elaborate more than what is necessarily coming through dialogue or that kind of thing. And the focus pullers are amazing storytellers themselves. What they do without marks and with things changing all the time is so impressive. Kirsten was my focus puller, and so I have to say that we had such a great working relationship. Her instincts and her timing are amazing, and which also then frees me up to not have to think, oh, if I decide to go and look at this person or what, something else that catches my eye, and be able to just really move through the story. And so following my instincts, and then it's not like, oh, well, can I do this? Is she going to, be able to catch up or something like that? She's right there with me, and we're just in it together. So we were a great team in that way.
So the focus pullers are able to be on the floor, or they're in another room pulling remotely? How does that work?
Well, they're remote, but I mean, in it in a way of emotionally in the story with
Right,
me,
right.
and just so in tune of like she was just nailing a focus no matter what was going on, and then also picking up, they're as storytellers, they're picking up on things, whether it's like going to see someone in the background or if there's two people stacked in a shot, who to go to, and really just also being tuned in that way.
Which is a big thing in a story where you're constantly having big casts, right? You're lots of people in the room, lots of people inside smaller rooms. I wanted to talk about sort of how the freedom you had on this show. It sounded like you mentioned it earlier with JoJo, but it sounded like her and the director and the showrunners, everybody gave these operators the freedom to do what you need to do to be a storyteller. Talk a little bit about that, maybe relative to other shows. We don't want to put anybody down, but just relative to how you've worked on other episodics.
Yeah, there definitely was more freedom. I mean, first of all, just being handheld is a certain kind of freedom, but also responsibility. You have to be tuned in because you are then, more intuitively moving with everything. And really it came down to trust, and JoJo again, her trust really opens up us to be more creative and us to put our input in and just be like thinking proactively. And she really embraced that. And also, if you're thinking too much of like if someone's, micromanaging the timing or all that kind of stuff, you're not with your instincts, you're in your head, and you can't do your job as well then. Right. And so the freedom that like, even if I would just make a choice and if it wasn't what she or the director wanted, I know that I'll get a note and it's not like, oh, you made a mistake. Right. It's just, no, it's, I'm trusting you to do this and we'll adjust as needed, But
as the BCAM operator, you are the one that's often finding those special moments that can often define the story.
Yeah. And that to me is so fun, especially if the A camera is doing on one of the long, like walk and talk things of like, where are the moments that I can pop up or like run over to here and pop out a doorway, and what can I get that can work to also tell the story.
Right.
And it's interesting because there's a little less pressure in some ways, but then there's also more pressure, but it's
like your own standard you got to live up to, right?
Yes, exactly. Which, I really enjoy.
So we talked about the set with JoJo, but I want to mention an aspect that maybe wouldn't be so obvious. This is a medical set, and hospitals have sharp instruments, and they have things you can bump into and crash into. I want to talk about safety. Tell me how you guys felt on the show. Did you feel safe? Were there safety meetings? How was that addressed on the show?
Yeah, we definitely had safety meetings all the time. And, for any sharp objects, it was always announced, or it was, we never had real guns, just, plastic guns. But yes, definitely safety was a lot about background crossing while the cameras were moving too, just because there's so much activity in front of the cameras. So we would always be very careful about taking the rehearsals we needed to figure out crossing with gurneys, background, actors passing through small spaces, etc. Because really didn't want someone to get bummed and fall on the ground because, again, nothing moves. So there's a lot of things in the way still. And, for anything that's like surgery, sharp objects, these moments in general, when it was the real sharp objects were inserts most of the time, I would say, right? In general.
Which are more controlled.
Yeah, exactly. That would be a specific shot we would do for that, and there was no moving or anything with that. Otherwise, it was, in general, not the real tools or like, special effect tools that were not dangerous. But for anything that was cutting or anything like that was insert. And it was the case for prosthetic too, because we couldn't always see the prosthetic, in a specific way unless we would be in these inserts. So,
yeah, I would also like to add a shout out to our grips because Erdem and I each every day would have a grip with us to not only hand me the camera and then take it off my shoulder, which is very helpful, but to really keep me safe.
Shadow you essentially.
Yeah, we are moving. Everyone else is moving. We're all kind of doing our thing, and again, it's not always exact. So if I build the trust, which is really what it came down to, of like, I know that if I'm about to like run into someone or someone's going to run into me, they are watching where I'm going, where I'm about to go, what's happening. So I can be focusing on what I'm doing. And they basically are sometimes my eyes, or like I'm going to somewhere and then they have to put down like a half apple box for me to step on. And I don't even necessarily have to look, where they're putting it, because I say it's going to be there, and they see me about to step, and they do it. So it's just, we are really in their hands safety wise, and yeah, it's a really trusting relationship, and I'm very grateful for them.
and Keelan, your gaffer, your chief lighting technician, you had boom pole lights, right, that were following you around. Another element that right,
exactly, and that we worked well with them though, so it was not encumbered in any way. It was just kind of another dancer in the move who they kept an eye out for us, and my grips would keep an eye out for them. And it actually, in a way, there's a freedom to not having stands too, because you're not worried about running into a stand or seeing a stand in your shot. So it's actually more freeing than anything else.
And Keelan developed also a technique with the electricians that, when it gets too tight in the hallway for everyone to pass through, he would have another electrician with another boom and light waiting there. So the other one would stay behind and the other one would take over on the rest, So there was, again, on every department, there was this choreography organized. So, we could all fit through these hallways and go. So he would just add multiple and then have them switch if they need to.
So, one drawback for the DP, I would think, in this approach, you're lighting a space, you're not lighting people, and you have to sort of give up you want it to look cinematic, but you have to give up control, right? And it was shot single camera. So even though you have two cameras, for the most part, it was a single camera type approach. So how does that make you feel, knowing, you can't really maybe get the maximum control cinematically, lighting in favor of a more docu-style, realistic, natural feel?
Yeah, it's funny because for this show, I still feel like the lighting is, I think the lighting is right because it feels like in an ER. And I think the intensity that everyone is feeling from the show, it's bright, the walls are bright. If we had done anything more, nailed down on the walls or more shaped on their face, it would have not felt as real. Okay. I feel like the intensity and the way people think the show is so realistic is also transmitted with that kind of lighting and that, and the camera moves. If it was more shaped again and cinematic, maybe it would not feel that real. Okay. And so I think it was right for the show, but it's true. It's the only way we could do it.
Yeah.
Like it's
because you're not able to relight and reset, are you?
No, we're really following, with these lights and we're just helping as much as we can the faces. We do have to add sometimes, like sometimes you would have to have two poles at the same time because there was too many casts at the same time or too many skin tone differences. And so we would have to add more. We've watched the skin tones and the light on the faces all the time. And, we adjust as well during take sometimes. But I feel the environment in general in the ER feels right to what it should look like. We do have some locations, very few, but we do have some external night scenes, and obviously we had a bit more lighting there happening.
And we should mention the establishing work was done in Pittsburgh with one of our drone operator, John Tremba, I believe, did your drone aerial photography, right, for the establishing of the hospital in Pittsburgh. So both of you have worked in, documentaries. You've worked in this kind of style before, and the question is, how much does it help you when you go into a style like this that still is narrative and episodic? How much does that style of, finding moments in a doc, shooting live event where everything's unpredictable, shooting Big Brother where a person on the show might do something you're not ready for and you have to catch it or you'll never catch it again. How much did those things help? I'll start with you, Aymae, as an operator.
It's invaluable. Basically, with the background both in documentary and handheld work in general, this show kind of felt like a perfect fit in that way because I also have scripted experience, so I understand how those things work, but I have the instincts that I've kind of built up over the years. Years of like really listening and being tuned into people and knowing how to move again instinctively with them. And always keeping an eye out for if someone giving a look, is there a gesture? What else is going on? And that's where the documentary instinct comes in. And
I think it's adapting constantly. That's really what I think the documentary background comes from. It's you adapt nonstop to the situation. And like Aymae said, you might see moments that you didn't plan for, but you're looking out for them, and they might add you to the story, and they might just be a complete, unexpected surprise, right? And so you constantly adapt to elevate the story because there's so much going on. It's a show that's, giant cast, like the shots are moving. There's so many elements with coordination. You have to see everything. It's like when you're driving, right? You gotta have the view absolutely everywhere. You're not just looking at that face and like you're just keeping an eye out for everything. And I think that's really a documentary background. Yeah.
Everyone on the show is in scrubs, which sounds logical, right? But was that a problem for you? Like, did you ever confuse a character with a crew member? Or, is it clear like who's doing what on the set when you're trying to catch these beat cam moments?
It's actually pretty clear, especially as time goes on. I think it's actually great. The camera crew got to wear the black scrubs, so we'd be like, "Hello, doctor. Hello, doctor." But it didn't become confusing at all. So if anything, it's this weird thing of like we're all more of this family. We're all in this together kind of feeling.
Was there medical training? Because you said there's consulting doctors on the set, real nurses on the set. Yes. Was there medical training, at least for the cast, I assume?
For the cast, yes. Yeah. They had like a 2 weeks boot camp where they were learning, normal procedures and how to stitch and all of these things. So it looked real. Yeah. But no, just to add on what Aymae was saying, I don't think there was any confusion with the scrubs. If anything, I think it's more when we knew someone part of the crew was in the reflection, but they were in their scrubs, that no one would know. We know who they are, but no one else knows. So they would not know if they're background or not. And that has happened a few times with the grips, right? Yes, I would say. Because they have to follow camera. Sometimes your camera would see the A grip in the reflection, but he's wearing scrubs, so you would not know.
Aymae, JoJo told us a little bit about her, evolution story, about her backstory with Local 600 and joining the union. You've been in 12 years, so can you tell us a little bit about when you joined and how that came about?
Yeah. Well, I've been behind the camera a little over 20 years, but I definitely, as things progressed, wanted to join the union. I'm like a big supporter of the union in general. And so by the time I could do it with a little more easily with days, it was actually from my first season on Big Brother, where we had, I had the 100 days of because it was non-union at the time. Yeah. So I had my 100 days of non-union work. And I just kind of took the leap because I was really anxious to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm very proud, and then the show did flip eventually. So that helped with all the hours and healthcare. And it also made me ready for all the next steps that would come along in the union world.
Yeah, big shout out to Unscripted, because we covered Abbott Elementary, and I think their entire crew came out of reality TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you see that more and more in narrative and episodics. Wrapping it up, I'd like you both to kind of, sum up where the Pitt fits in your overall career arcs. It sounds pretty unique. It sounds like a great, experience in a family atmosphere, but maybe just kind of, as best you can, sum it up for where it fits in your world so far.
For me, it's definitely one of my favorite experiences of my whole career. Because it does feel like such a fit, but also the talent, again, behind the camera, but also in front of it, across the board, they're just so phenomenal, and also really good humans, which makes a difference. You enjoy being there with them, and it doesn't feel like, oh, the day is so long. It's just like, oh yeah, we're all doing this thing together, and yeah, it's really special in that way. And so it's definitely a highlight for me.
You both live in LA. Do you appreciate that it's all shot in Burbank on a stage in Los Angeles?
Absolutely.
What about you, JoJo?
Yeah, I think, and Aymae said it really well. Like, I think it's such a nice blend of narrative, but also, documentary, and all the experience I got so far kind of merges in there together. And I feel we're really pushing ourselves to work more with more elements at the same time and learning how to coordinate them, I really think also the crew, the cast, and the production was just fantastic. And when we really all enjoy working together, and most of the crew is going to come back. And I think this is rare, for a long show like this. I think there's another level too that was interesting. We shot in the same environment for 8 months, and, story that takes place in one day. And so you see the same thing over and over again. And the fear could be like, am I going to get bored, right?
Yeah.
Because you're doing the same thing. But there's something in these stories and with these characters that it always feels new. It's like you're discovering everything with them. And I think that was a really turnout in my career. It's like to really embrace and love doing the same environment with the same character and just going on that journey with them, really.
Shooting all 15 episodes of a, Mac show, of a major cable show, whatever you want to call it, streaming show, is not typical. Doesn't matter your gender, right? Shooting all 15 episodes is unusual. So last question to you, were you daunted by that at any point? Or did you just kind of say, I'm going to get through this one episode at a time, and that's how we'll do it?
Well, the funny story is that when I interviewed for the job, I thought I was interviewing for an alternative position. So I didn't know it was a
alternating DP.
Yeah, I thought I was interviewing for that, the first interview. And then during that interview, I learned they were just looking for a sole DP position. And I was like, I'm never going to get it. But actually, it turned out the process went really well. And it makes total sense. I was not afraid to do the 15 episodes. Actually, I really embraced it because it's so continuous. The story, if you miss an episode, you're going to miss any evolution or adaptation of each character per hour, right? And it was, I think, really important to have a DP staying from 1 to 15. So it feels smooth and continuous from hours 1 to 15 with different directors, that there's a pillar that stays and grounded, and with the crew as well, Right. So with not two DPs, two DPs can really work. I did that on The Rookie and we work really well together with the other DP, but it's important to, on this show, because of the continuity, to find a unity that stays. And I think that's why they want only one DP. And that makes sense to me. I was happy to be part of the full story. Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming in. Really appreciate it. And it was great talking with you both.
Same. Thank you for having us.
Thanks. A big thanks to Johanna Coelho and Aymae Sulick for joining us on Outside the Frame. Fans of the Pitt were thrilled when Max recently announced it's been renewed for a second season. Hopefully, we can check back next year to hear what these two wonderful filmmakers are up to in and out of the ER. Until then, we'll see you on the set. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode.